Yeah, hello and a very warm welcome to this DocYard webinar by LuraTech. We are great to have you here as participants, but we are also still expecting a few more participants, and from our experience it sometimes takes a minute or two to log on. So we asked you to hold on for another 2 minutes until we actually really start the webinar, and we will of course do our best to be finished in time. Okay? Thank you very much for your patience. Helmut, what do you think? Okay to start now?
Yes, I think we should start now.
Okay, so please also start the recording. Hello and welcome again, or welcome for the first time, however long you've been waiting here, to LuraTech's webinar on production integration for scan service providers using our DocYard product. My name is Armin Ortmann. I am the CTO of LuraTech, and with me is Helmut Schünemann, Head of Sales for LuraTech Europe. We will guide you through this webinar. A few technicalities to start with. As you may have overheard, this webinar will be recorded, so we will provide it for download for you or your colleagues or whoever you'd like to show it. It will be freely available. Also, you may have noticed that all participants are muted at this time. That does not mean we want to shut out questions, but questions need to be inserted through this questions dialog box that you see with the GoToMeeting software. So whenever you type a question in there, we'll see it. We'll try to answer it throughout the webinar as fast as possible. From our experience, that's not always possible, but we promise we will get back to you later with answers if we cannot provide them during the webinar. And of course, also, if anything comes up in the aftermath, don't hesitate to contact us via email or phone through the addresses and phone numbers shown. Also, at the end of the webinar, there's going to be a very brief, quick little questionnaire that we would ask you to fill in to help us gather feedback and improve our webinars. Helmut, anything I forgot? Otherwise,
no.
I hand over to you for the presentation.
Thanks, I think we are complete. Also a very warm welcome from my side. I would guide with a few slides to the presentation from Armin. For those who are the first time in this webinar concerning DocYard, I have 2 slides or 3 slides to introduced into DocYard. What is it? What is it made for? It's a production and integration platform for scan service providers. This will lead us to the next slide. What is the challenge for scan service providers? Your challenge is every job must be profitable. Delivery in time is the mission critical thing, and the key to success is guaranteed quality. And how to approve this, we will see on the next slide. It's just a few keywords. The solution for this from our side is DocYard. It's a centrally managed system. It's flexible and highly scalable, and it follows an integrated approach. And this integrated approach we will show on with another slide about the general workflow which you may have as scan service provider in your production. It's nearly the same. The schedule may change a little bit, but what you see here are the manual and automatical steps in production, starting with receiving goods. That means incoming paper. This paper has to be prepared before you can scan it and import it in the system. These actions can be tracked from DocYard so that you know the efforts you have spent for these manual tasks, and all this will be stored in the database, and we will see in the end of the presentation how we analyze these statistical data, these performance data. We also write in the database during automatical processing, which might be page processing, barcode interpretation, splitting documents by using barcodes, reading form layouts, and collect data from a database or compared with values in the database, correct it, transform the electronic files in the output format, make quality assurance at the end, and export all the files and index data for your customer. And at the end, you will have information to create the invoices. That's what is DocYard made for. And for every step you see here in the slide, we have a module or a client that can be used inside DocYard. Now we come to the headline of today: how to realize very short setup times and how create sophisticated reports. So we will go to the next slide, please. And one thing is to use macros and our macro repository during creation of jobs. What is a macro? A macro inside DocYard is an interpreted sequence which is created with Windows PowerShell. It's a well-known tool. Everybody can reach it. It's native use, as you will read it in the online documentation which came from Microsoft, or in some books you can also buy in the bookshop, whatever you want. We did not put in any special thing. We use it as it is. So during the job configuration, you can easily create such a macro, or you can reuse it because you have done similar things in the past, and you can load it from the repository and use it again. It will interpret it during runtime of the job, and macros can have access to all metadata, to index data which are created during processing. You can attach items and file names, and you can use barcode values and do some things triggering around with barcodes and whatever. Okay, next slide, please. Well, what are macros made for? Macros are used in modules for definition of of branches or decision criteria. For example, this goes to the one side of the processing, this goes to the other side. You can use it for event handling if a special event occurs during presentation, and it's used for easy integration of external tools. You can also use macros to start external tools in a job. And concerning index data, macros are used for generation of index files, and they are also used for standardization, for example, date values. You have a lot of letters from customers, and the creation date of the letter is sometimes written in this way and sometimes written in another way, and you can use this for standardization of the date format. So we have in the index data always the same kind of data stored. And you can also use it for validation of index fields. For example, doing consistency checks or doing modulo checks for accounting numbers or something like this. And in the end, for generation and validation, you can use database queries. For example, to check values against database tables, or to complete index data. You have, for example, a barcode value, and with this barcode value you go into your database and combine this value with a complete sentence from the database that describes, for example, the customer. Okay, more in the presentation. Now we will come to the next topic today, statistics and invoicing. If you remember this slide with all these processing steps inside the workflow, please be aware that every step is protocoled in the database. And all these kinds of data, performance data, can be analyzed in a report. So we have a detailed analysis of all manual processing steps, which is very important for you, because all of you know that, for example, the paper preparation is one of the most expensive tasks inside your processing. And you can also analyze performance data from automatic processing. If you have a bottleneck in your processing, you can analyze the performance data of your automatic processing and can decide to put special resources more into this job. For example, give them a third or a second core for better and quicker OCR, for example, not to get in trouble with the delivery time. And all these data which are stored in the database are the basis for invoice creation and for overall performance analysis. And last but not least, you can use this information for recalculating your existing job. Is the job really positive, or do I burn money with it? And on the other hand, you can use it for calculation of your quotations. If you have a tender, for example, and you get testing material, you can set up a prototyping and a job which is similar to the real production later on. You can process your testing material and can calculate how high your efforts may be, and you have a better feeling with your quotation to the customer. Okay, and then we have the last slide. Well, reports can be created in two different ways. The first is the item you are analyzing is the job. All data around the job. The job is a one-day job, or it's a one-week job, or it's a job for a month, or it's a job which is running half a year or whatever. You can collect all data concerning this job in one report. And on the other hand, you can also analyze the performance of your employees. While creating these reports, the system guides you with a few default values for quicker selection of the reporting period, for example. So you can choose current week, current month, or something like this. So you need only do 2 or 3 mouse clicks and then you have the report generated. But the reports are basis for your accounting team to invoice your customer, and that means we have to have the possibility to print these reports on the one hand, or better to export it or store it, for example, as TXT file, as HTML file, or as comma separated file. So you can import it in Excel and use it in any other application around this. More we will see in a few minutes in Armin's presentation. Thanks for your attendance, and now I will hand over to Armin, who has prepared some things to show you how to use macros and how to generate reports. Okay, Armin,
yes,
it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Helmut. Yes. Just a quick note. I had some troubles with this computer, which you should not blame on DocYard, as DocYard is running in a virtual machine here. But I had to quickly reboot the computer, and it looks as though everything in the virtual machine is still fine. If I encounter any trouble, I ask you to apologize, please. Yeah, you see these warnings here. That's actually really due to the fact that the machine had to be restarted. But it looks as though the job were still running. Okay, what am I going to show you here? I'm going to show you this workflow. This is the DocYard cockpit, this window here. This is like the control panel, the dashboard for all DocYard. You have a DocYard installation running in the background with 2 so-called module managers, and of course we have a process set up. This process is described or follows this workflow consisting of a handful of modules. We have a TIFF import module, which will just import single-page TIFF files. It will read them into internal TIFF images. The TIFF files actually represent invoices. There are invoices with 1 page, there are 2-page invoices, and but the beginning of every invoice is marked by a barcode, and that's why we have this barcode splitting module here. So we'll look for barcodes, split the pile of paper accordingly into invoices, and this of course could fail. Barcodes may not be recognized at all, or may be misrecognized. We have deliberately inserted an example here which will get detected, and where we have the chance to correct the error and manually split at a point where a barcode was not properly detected. The next thing that happens is that according to the barcode value, some additional index data is pulled from a database. Well, that's a bit exaggerated. It's not really a database. It's a CSV file, basically an Excel sheet that's residing locally in the input folder, but we are querying it through an ODBC interface, which makes it look a lot like it were a real database, and we're populating further index fields from that file. That again may fail. Actually, again, we have deliberately introduced a sample in an example where the key value is not found in the database, and therefore manual entry has to correct or has to account for that to populate all index fields properly. Once that is done, we do actually group the single pages in the way they should be grouped as invoices, and then we use our LuraTech MRC compression to create 1 PDF per invoice and simply write them to PDF files. Okay. The files are actually read from folders, and I think I have to delete this leftover from the crash. Okay. And the output is created in folders accordingly. I will mimic scanning another batch by using this command here in a second. One thing worth mentioning is, well, this is really, I really stripped down an existing workflow, which we use for demo purposes, which again is a stripped down and simplified version of something that one of our customers currently uses, which really looks a lot more like the diagram that Helmut just showed in his presentation. This is simply to keep it halfway manageable and to have a decent chance of explaining what's going on here. So if there are some loose ends and some things where you think, well, yeah, this would have to be checked again and this would have to be verified, I ask for your kind understanding. This is all we can manage in the scope of one of these webinars, but I hope we'll have good examples for all sorts and types of macros. Yes, one thing that definitely needs to be explained is the item structure for this job, which can be seen here. And what we have basically is the whole batch. A batch is more or less corresponding to such a folder. That's where the documents of one batch are scanned, and that's the way they are output again in a different directory, but all images or all documents pertaining to a batch in one and the same folder. We have only one level of item below those, and that's the actual invoice document. So you don't need to model the individual page here. The page objects are inserted and handled implicitly, but once the pages really arrive here at this point, they can be grouped according to the structure of either single page or double page invoices that we have determined throughout the process. Okay? And we do have a list of index fields. Again, I have to ask for, I have to apologize that this should read index number anyway. It's too late to change that now as we have the job running. But what we do have is, and they're all these index fields are associated with invoice items. So as there are no further elements in the item hierarchy, this is of course the obvious choice. We do have a barcode. We do have basically the year to which the invoice pertains. We have the date the invoice arrived. We have an invoice number. We have the date of the actual invoice. We have a total amount, and we have a page count. Okay, those are index fields. Some of them, for example, the barcode is populated from what the barcode splitting actually determines, or from what you have to, from what you enter afterwards when you do the manual correction of a failed split. Okay, most of the others are populated here with this invoice data lookup. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. All right. In order to be able to explain halfway. Okay. Sorry. One thing I forgot. Right here, properties. About the index fields. You may have seen they are of different types. Some are text, some are numeric, some are regular expression. These are actually also checks that are applied whenever someone, for example, enters index data or whenever an index field is populated with data. So for the regular expression literate, this basically means barcode is an 8-digit number, nothing else. Okay. Also, a year, for example, is a 4-digit number. That gives you a certain amount of control over how or what types of values are entered here. But what we also see is here that, sorry, this one here, that there are macros for validating text, for example. This is grayed out because the job is already running, so I'm not allowed to really change anything about it anymore. But if we look into this, and this is like the first glimpse of the macro editor, you see that within the macro we can do a regular expression check for something that's 2 digits, another 2 digits, 4 digits, which would basically be in the American notation month, date, and year. But of course, there are combinations where you have a month 13 or a day 41, which don't really make for valid calendar dates. And that is something that could be checked against here, because we have this function, check date, which is actually a library function within the DocYard macro repository. It's here. And that internally does really check whether a given combination of digits actually represents a valid date and not something like March 46th or something. Okay, that's the first I show you about macros. This is really a validation macro. It is used to validate index values against a rule that you have specified, that we have specified here for the workflow. Okay. Other instances of macros are really situated within these modules, rather within the configuration of these modules. Whenever I click on the modules, you see down here that you see a lot of configuration values, or maybe only some. And some are really simple like this. They are literal values like true or false. But already here you can see, well, if true or false is simply just not enough. If you don't want to have a constant value, but you want to have something that is recalculated whenever an object arrives, you could replace one of these literal values with a macro, and you could basically roll a dice, for example, to decide whether true or false should hold for any incoming object, which at this point would correspond to incoming PDF files. And what we do here, we do have two macros. One determines actually the folder where the files are written. So basically you could write every file to an individual folder, but what we really do here is just create a new subdirectory output and then create the same folder hierarchy relatively to the input folder that the input files have. Okay, and then we also use a macro to determine the output file name because we had single page input TIFFs, okay, and we create possibly a two-page PDF output from those, and therefore it's of course good to have a rule to really get to sensible file names. We cannot really feasibly reuse the TIFF file names. So what we do is and that's really just an example. It could be, of course, something more useful or something more sensible. What we do is we use the barcode value. As you remember, that should be 8 digits, then dash, and then we use the invoice number as it has been determined or entered as index data. And since the invoice numbers, unfortunately, can contain slashes, which in terms of file names, of course, have a different significance, we replace those with dashes. And that, for the batches we already did through our test runs, that basically makes up for file names like these here. So you have the 8 digits from the barcode, and then you have some invoice number, which at this point does not really adhere to a fixed schema, but probably is individual for every supplier. Okay, that's one use. So we use macros here to dynamically configure things that otherwise would have been added as constants. And that, of course, gives us greater flexibility, and of course, something like having a certain rule in place for naming output files is, I think, an everyday thing to do. The compression and the invoices don't really have interesting macros assigned to them. What's also interesting is this one here. This branch module really relies on a macro. It has a macro inside, and that macro determines where objects are routed, whether they are routed to this upper channel or the lower one, where the lower one would mean, well, this has to be edited manually because something is not okay. And what is not okay is basically, well, if the index value invoice number is plain empty, that's definitely not okay. That's the test we apply here. We could, of course, as you may guess, apply more elaborate tests, but that's the one we do here. And while we're at it, this right-hand side shows you a set of variables that are predefined for such a macro. So that's some stuff that you can use. And here you see, for example, the job, the objects, and the task. I won't go into any details here, but lots of interesting things, such as, for example, the input folder or the bash name or some other things, and of course index data, such as you have here, are associated with these objects. So using the PowerShell syntax, you can basically access these values, and we will see in a second that you can also change them. So for example, you can set an index value, okay? So that's the check that applies here. If there is no invoice number, well, we have to treat the document manually. And here, this is another module that's really just dedicated to executing a macro. This module really does nothing else than execute a macro for every item that arrives. It does not change the item otherwise, but of course, within the macro, you can do a lot of things. And what we do here is the mentioned database lookup, where certain index values are set. And down here, we really use this text and CSV ODBC driver, and then we can have this select statement down here and set all these index values, such as invoice number, invoice date, invoice total, date of receipt, and that's it already. They are taken from this CSV, and the key value actually is the barcode. So they are looked up by barcode. And what you also see here is that you can really have multi-line macros. You can actually use the entire PowerShell syntax, so you can write your own functions and then have call the functions, have the functions call each other, and some of the functions are already supplied. This is rather on an example level here within so-called macro repository. So whenever you write a function and think, oh well, this does something useful, such as checking a date, you can have it in this repository and make use of it wherever you need it without explicitly having to write down the same stuff over and over again. Okay? One final thing, one final instance of a macro is this split module, where the macro is actually used, and that's what we call a hook. That's not something that's really part of the configuration of the module, but something that is evaluated whenever a certain thing occurs. And the natural thing, of course, for a barcode module is detecting a barcode, and we have configured the barcode module to create new items, to split documents and to create new items. And therefore, whenever you create a new item, this macro is dedicated to determining the item's identifier. And that's, of course, something that could also later be used not only for database protocols, but also for file name creation or whatever. Okay. Yeah, there are a few more macros here, but they conceptually they add nothing new, so I won't explain them in further detail. Just to show you what this all really is about, the actual workflow looks more like this, but I wanted to spare you that level of complexity. Instead, what I'll do is, and keep your fingers crossed that this works after my little reboot action, I'll just quickly run one batch through the macros so you see what I described in terms of okay, that didn't work so well. Let's try. Okay, that's probably really been fouled up by the reboot, and I'll really go into hack mode now and just basically help myself to a new batch. Ask for your understanding. That is unfortunate. So this is my last attempt. Okay. Now I'm getting two. Anyway. All right. And what you see here now is that some activity is actually going on. I'll pause this one just to make sure I get to the right one in my little demo. Okay. All right, 09, check splitting. This usually takes a second. I ask you to have a little patience. This is just a virtual machine running on my laptop. It should be ready in a second. There you go. Okay, so here's what I described. You do have a document where you have barcodes, and this one here we deliberately fouled up. Of course, this barcode does not really get recognized, but I can split this item, and of course from many presentations I know what to do, and that's what I do. I'll insert a new one with a new name, and then I'll connect to the second instance. One, 9 key, and there's this other deliberate sample where you see no invoice data was actually inserted into the index fields, and all I'll need here is the invoice number. You see this little red line that indicates that there was no match for the regular expression. So yeah, maybe let's enter something here. The invoice date, this is a German document, would be something like 09/28/2011. You see the red box vanishes, so I'm fine, and I'll also enter the invoice number here. And just so you know, we have been at this one. I will deliberately type something that's not quite right, and let's see whether we can find that document in the output folder, which would be here. And there you see the document with the triple Z, and that's the one we just had from 28th August of 2011. Okay, that's basically how it works. As I said, there is a macro repository which is actually protected by user rights management, so you can restrict the number of people who can take a look at that. And what you can basically see here is how these library methods are implemented, and given the proper rights, you can add your own and have those persisted in our DocYard database, independent of individual workflows and jobs. And final thing, the reporting, that's also accessed through this tools main menu entry, and here you have a selection. Here you have a selection of users. What I'll do now is I'll create a quick report for the job we just ran, and you can select an interval. Maybe let's take this week. There is nothing outside of this week anyway. and simply apply that. And what you get here is a list of data, report generated, job started, job hasn't finished yet. That's true, therefore we cannot really know what the time was. And we've done 6 batches so far, and you see, for example, the crash did not annihilate this information. It's still present in here. Each of the batches had 30 pages, so that's okay. We have 180 pages, and you get detailed timing information as to how long every batch ran, what time it actually did consume, and also for these check splitting and keying steps you get this level of detail. And of course, since I just basically clicked away everything, there is barely 10 minutes I spent, but you see that that spent the time sometime during this week. Finally, you get a more fine-grained report for every individual batch, also with a list of the items. And here you see this really mirrors the item hierarchy that you configured for the job. So whatever objects were counted in the individual modules appear here in this breakdown along with a total at the bottom. And again, you see here this together makes up for the 10 minutes actually really spent for interactive work. And you also see there were 168 PDF documents exported. That difference to the 180 TIFF files imported results from the number of 2-page documents here. Okay? And yeah, that's basically the information that's basically drawn from the database, and that of course would be the kind of information that you could use for your calculations and for your invoicing. Last quick remark down here, we have
just a short additional information. I think it's clear, but we should point it out a little bit. I mean, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It's important to see that you have both informations here, the number of invoices and also the number of pages. Sometimes you have a contract with your customer for a number of invoices or a number of documents, and sometimes you have a contract for a number of pages or papers or files, whatever, folders, sorry, not files, folders. So you can collect the item type that you need for your invoicing. DocYard is very flexible at this time. So you can generate those data you need for your invoice for your special customer and the special job or contract.
Yes. Okay. We have almost used up the time. Helmut, do you already see any questions?
There's a question about the usability of macros during processing. Can the keying staff use these or change these macros during processing?
No, that's definitely not the case. You may have, of course, seen also from the example that we showed that anyway, the way these macros work, of course, it would require a slightly more sophisticated user than you would probably have among your keying staff, and this is really limited to the people configuring the workflows. So also in terms of security, in terms of user rights, this is really tied to the ability to configure a workflow, and it really only ever occurs in this DocYard cockpit. So once you're here in this quality assurance client, and you are concerned with keying values, you don't get to see anything of the macros anymore. All you get to see is this kind of red boxes or error messages for things that violate a macro. So you get feedback, but you don't get to see the code. You don't have any real influence. As you saw before, once the job runs, I'm not even able to actively change the macro of the running job anymore. And as you see here, when I connect to this keying bit, I do get the index field specified, but there is no way to really access the macro. What I see is that if I type letters where numbers would be expected, then I get a warning. Okay? So in terms of security, this is about as secure, as trusted as the creation of workflows in itself. From the German webinar this morning, we had a question, maybe that's worth mentioning here as well, concerning the dialect of PowerShell. That's not the case. We're not using some kind of special dialect. This is not something that we added on top of the language, but the language, the syntax, the engine here is really pure PowerShell as freely distributed by Microsoft. All we really did is add these variables and functions to it. But whatever happens in here follows the rules as described in any kind of standard documentation for PowerShell. So you don't need to learn a specific DocYard language in order to develop such macros, and you don't need, for that, you don't need any specific training or special guidance and hints and caveats. Helmut, if there aren't any further questions, I don't see this questions box. What's happening on your side?
No, nothing more.
Okay.
I think we are complete.
Yeah, as we have also...
I think we are complete.
Yeah, as we have also more or less used up our time, actually with 3 minutes overtime. Again,
it's just 3 minutes we waited at the beginning.
Yeah, but we promised to stick to our time. Then.
Okay. Okay.
Probably the workaround for the crash cost me 2 minutes, I might say. Anyway, thank you for attending the webinar. Of course, again, we'll be available for any further questions and information, and we hope to see you again at some, or don't see you, but you'll be attending another of our future webinars concerning DocYard and other interesting things. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.